Je voulais vous présenter aujourd'hui notre interlocuteur sur Internet of Things, Monsieur Gert Matthijs, donc directeur pour les Digital Cash Products. En fait, il est responsable donc pour le développement de l'offre autour de la technologie Internet of Things, mais pas que ça. En fait, il travaille aussi beaucoup sur les API, sur la blockchain, sur le big data, plein de sujets de services digitaux que Deutsche Bank est en train de développer. Donc merci à nouveau et voilà. Bon, Monsieur Gert Matthijs en fait va faire la présentation en anglais, mais il comprend parfaitement le français et parle le français, mais il est plus à l'aise en anglais. Donc la présentation va être en anglais, mais n'hésitez pas à poser vos questions en français, il n'y a pas de souci. Merci.
Ok, merci. Donc je vais vous parler. I'm gonna talk to you about Internet of Things. I think it's good to start with a definition such that we are all kind of on the same page of what it is. So it's the technology that connects objects to a network such that information is given to that network about the condition, the position, the location, the movement of these objects. So condition that could be things like, is the object in use or not? What's the temperature of the object or so? So, useful information that can be distributed about that particular object. Kevin Ashton, he was kind of the first to define the Internet of Things. It's a professor at MIT, and he had a very interesting definition. He says that things are waking up because these things have their own means of collecting information such that they can basically see, hear, and smell the world for themselves. And so it's a very interesting definition, but also a bit of a scary one. So, things start to live if you want. And to give you an idea of size, 5 years ago or so, there were hardly any connected objects, but today there are already 25 billion connected objects, and many of us know things like, Fitbit or Apple Watch or these type of things. So they are connected objects. But the prediction is that by 2025, there will be 75 billion of connected objects. So that is, a massive growth, basically. And everything is getting connected, and you can imagine these connected objects in all sorts of applications. So we as consumers, smart homes, connected cars, and these type of things, but also in public services, smart parking spots, connected roads, such that traffic can be more regulated, a lot around security of people. And also in the industrial applications. Smart agriculture, follow, cattle where they go, basically connected machines that you have, a lot in healthcare, obviously. So in fact, the number of applications is only limited by our own imagination today. Now, to kind of come to the subject of today, which is to kind of understand what is going to be the impact of the Internet of Things on the job of the treasurer, on financial institutions. It's really important to understand how business models will change. And therefore, let's look at 5 different business models that you can think of through the Internet of Things for your companies. And so the first one is in fact pretty obvious one, which is a so-called subscription model. So what you might have today is a particular product that you are selling, and from that product you get a one-time income. And so what you could do instead of selling that product and then kind of forgetting about it, you could say, I'm going to servicize my product, and that means that you're going to basically maintain it through the life cycle and probably increase the life cycle of the product. And so you turn your income model into a model of, you know, selling your product one time, in generating a recurring income through the service that you apply to the product. And you can do that because you can actually follow up the condition, the state in which the product finds itself. So you can do things like predictive maintenance. So that means that as a company, you can basically detect, is there a risk of the product getting broken, say, you know, in 1 week or in 2 weeks' time, and so there offer replacement parts or, you know, do maintenance on the product that you offer. And so that can generate new income for your company. A second model is asset sharing model. So could I just pay for the amount of car that I use? And so, you know, there are already car sharing offers available today. And so the Internet of Things allows you actually to measure how much time particular people are using the car, in this case, where the car is located, such that it can be used by someone else. And so that means that instead of having one single customer for one product, you actually get many more customers for one particular product, and another income model, which is, you know, a pay-per-use income model. So that is a second business model that you can think of through the Internet of Things. A third example is an outcome-based model. People don't buy drills, but they buy holes. So basically what you are charging for is for the real value that your product is delivering. So if, for example, you are producing pumps, a water pump, then instead of charging your client for the pump itself, you could imagine a model where you charge your client for the amount of water that has been moved by your pump. And as such, your pricing, in fact, what you charge is much more reflected of the outcome, of the value that your client is getting from the object or from the product that you sell to your client. So also here, a change in business model that you can basically imagine to obtain through the Internet of Things. The next one is the razor blade model. So what you do is gillettize your product. So that means that you give away actually the main product, or you sell it for a very cheap price, in this case the razor. But then the spare parts that you need, so the refills, the blades, basically you charge to your client. And obviously what is very interesting in the Internet of Things is that you can deliver the refills just in time. So that means that, you know, through your connected object, you know when a refill is needed. And so you deliver that refill just in time, especially in the industry where, you know, machines need to be refilled, where, you know, you have a lot of spare parts to be delivered. If you can measure through your Internet of Things when these spare parts are needed, that means that, in fact, the company to who you sell doesn't need to have any stock anymore, because you always deliver just in time. And you as a provider, you know exactly when what is needed at what point in time. So that means that the value that you offer is not just the product that you deliver, but is actually, you know, the whole service around it, and is the fact that your company, your client, can reduce heavily costs because they don't have to maintain stock, basically. So that is the so-called razor blade model. And then last but not least is to monetize the IoT data itself. So it's a new source of income. For example, if you are a car company and your car is connected, then you could say, I'm gonna measure the driving habits of the driver. So, or is the driver always, following the speed limits? And so on. So that could be obviously very interesting information for an insurance company. So you could imagine that, as a car manufacturer, with consent of the driver, because, there is a lot of to do around data privacy, you could, start selling that data towards an insurance company, and the advantage for the driver is that if they drive safely, obviously, that they can better cheaper insurance premiums, for example. But that's not the only example here. You can think of many other applications. For example, if you are a phone provider, so a mobile phone provider. Certain people might be interested in moving patterns. For example, if you're a real estate company and so you're renting out real estate, it might be very interesting to know, how many people are, moving through my building, where exactly are they walking, and so based on the amount of people walking at a particular location, you could charge a bit more than at other locations, because shops might be interested in real estate where a lot of people are walking by, obviously. Right, so you can see that through the Internet of Things, there are basically a lot of changes, new business models possible, even with your existing products. So if you can make your existing products connected to the internet, it means that you can, start to differentiate yourself and, transform your business with these new business models and get new sources of income. And so I thought that it's important for you to understand that, because it's precisely that, this change in business model, that is going to have an impact on corporate treasury, that is going to have an impact on financial services. And so what are two main impacts here? So very often, you go from an income model that is relatively fixed. So you sell a product, and so your income is kind of, P times V. So the price of your product and the volume of product that you sell. But with a lot of these business models, that is changing. And so your income model is becoming much more volatile, basically. It's based on usage, is based on outcome. And so therefore, the patterns of your incomes are really changing, and that has implications for corporate treasury and for the modeling of your sales and operations, basically. The other thing is that you need to be able to handle a lot of data. So today, it is sometimes said that there are billions of data available, and so we already today have a filtering problem. So to filter out basically what is useful data, what is intelligence. But with the Internet of Things, if we get all these things connected, there is a tremendous amount of additional data that we need to filter for, and so that means that also our systems in corporate treasury will need to change, specifically because the data that you get from Internet of Things is gonna affect your income patterns, and is also gonna affect the stock levels that you need in your companies and so on, and therefore for example the cost of goods in your supply chain. So it means that all these changes require also changes in systems and in financial service offers. So let's look for a moment at what these new needs could be. In Treasury, for Treasury operations, risk management, and corporate finance. So first of all, in Treasury operations, it's kind of obvious that your patterns, your models for cash forecasting will need to change and account for that higher level of volatility that you will see. So after a while, you probably will be able to, predict certain behaviors based on what is used from your product. But, if you move, for example, to that, outcome-based model, where you had the example of the water pump, you are not selling your water pump anymore, but you are selling movement of water, then obviously that has, an impact on how your cash will flow. The second impact is to be expected in payments. So if you look at payment patterns now, they kind of, occur at regular moments. With the Internet of Things, you can probably expect much more infrequent payments with a higher frequency, but with much lower amounts. So in the banking world, we speak about micropayments, so very small amounts with very high volumes that might occur in payments. So for risk management, a bit the same story as for cash flow forecasting. So your exposure identification and your measurements about the exposure that you have will probably also change in terms of profile. And that requires you to think together with your software providers about, new types of forecasting models and risk identification models. And then in finance, the financing could become different, and I'll give an example of certain bank products that you can expect through the Internet of Things in terms of new types of loans that you can get. An obvious change is in trade finance. So one thing that you'll be able to do through the Internet of Things is track the goods from the raw material into basically the assembly of that raw material into a real product. And so currently in trade finance, you often finance or release funding based on the location of a good, based on documents that are issued maybe by the port or something like that. So, but if you can, for example, measure location of goods, you can measure the condition of goods, like the temperature. So if it's food, you always want to have it frozen. So if the thing can measure that, that means that only based on that information, the bank can automatically release financing and basically remove all the documentation, because the system is able to communicate that with certainty to the bank, such that the bank can release those funds to the corporate. So there are a lot of new needs, mostly related to that volatility, but the new types of information that you can also gather. So with these new needs come new financial products, and so this is what we are working on. In our world. And so I want to give you a bit of a glance of these new products that will appear in the market related to the Internet of Things. So a first product is machine-to-machine payments. So, for example, we work with car manufacturers. The hype of the self-driving cars, so autonomous electric vehicles. So, if a vehicle is able to charge itself at an electric charging station, you could imagine that the vehicle is automatically paying the charging station. And so that's basically a machine-to-machine payment. So it's, the vehicle able to measure how much, electricity have I charged. So I owe that, electricity system so much money, basically. And so this is what you call machine-to-machine payments. Automated inventory purchase payments. So often when you see in the news, Internet of Things, people talk about, the fridge reordering itself, right? Refilling itself. So you need something like automated inventory purchase payments. So that means that whatever, is purchased automatically by the machine also needs to be paid for it and needs to be accounted for. So that's also a new type of payment that you can see. Machine as a service. So that means that you have a subscription model. So you pay per use, and so that means that your thing needs to be able to pay for the amount of time that it has been used. So in all these type of new payments, huge volumes, very small amounts, and so the technique to do that is often kind of having virtual accounts. So one machine is linked to a virtual account, the other machine is also linked to a virtual account, and you then do money transfers between these virtual accounts, which finally end up to be owned by a particular company or by a real person. So in the first instance, the machine-to-machine payment is actually a settlement through these virtual accounts, but at the end of the day, there is some sort of real physical settlement happening. Other types of products is IoT-based risk scoring. So when now a bank estimates a credit risk of a particular company, it's often based on paper, so based on the yearly reports or something like that, and so it's kind of intangible. It's not sure if it reflects reality. But if you can value the measure of a company, if you can measure the value of a company based on, for example, the value and number of goods that are in the supply chain or that they have in stock or that they are selling effectively, you can get a much better measurement as a financial institution of the value, of the real value of a company. And so therefore do better risk scoring and do smart pricing of loans. So that means that the loan that you give out is in fact much better suited to the need for funding of the company and much better reflecting the risk, such that we as banks are capable to price our loans better based on what is effectively happening in the factory. The last example, a bit related to that, is asset replacement loans. So if we can measure when an asset is kind of at the end of the life cycle, a bank could proactively provide a loan to replace that particular asset, basically. So you can see that the change in business models is leading, to changes in needs for financial services, but also we as banks are trying to, find out how can we use the Internet of Things to then provide new services that can respond to those needs. And so this is kind of how I would like to conclude in terms of next steps you could think of. So I think it's, one of the roles that we have is to try to make our own companies better, try to think of new profit models of new value that we can offer to our clients. And so that is what we need to start with. So research the capabilities of Internet of Things, so understand what is potentially possible with Internet of Things, and through that create new opportunities through some of these business models that I have gone through. And once you understand that, you can focus on how these changes in business models will effectively impact corporate treasury. And so take those impacts away and talk to your financial service providers, to your system providers, to run them through the changes that you are expecting and try to, co-develop the new services with them. And so, certainly myself, as a developer of these new services, I'm very interested in, getting your views on what your needs are, such that, we can develop the right products for you. So this is what I have prepared. And if you have questions, aussi en français. Pas très bien, mais quand même, un peu.
I have just one question. I'm just wondering if there is 75 billion devices going to start communication between, let's say, the landscape that we don't know is going to look like and the financial services. What will be the protocol when I see, first of all, how it was painful to set in place all the electronic communication between us, corporate and banks? How does, let's say, my chair will communicate with my bank to say, okay, guys, you can trigger a loan with my counterpart because it's going to sit on me in 5 seconds. See what I mean?
So yeah, there is obviously a big evolution still to go through in terms of protocols and communication, and also data privacy and regulation around that. Now we see that for certain things it already works, right? So there are already wearables and connected devices that are there today. So the techniques are there to make it work. There is 5G coming, so also that will obviously help in these type of things. Yeah. Yeah.
Financial services like, I don't know, a startup which might come up and say, okay, guys, we can do it. There is plenty of startups.
Yeah. So yeah, we believe in that sense a lot in collaboration, and in collaboration with fintech, with startups that have know-how in these areas. Now it's not only smaller companies, there are also very big companies very active in Internet of Things, working on that, like a Siemens or a GE, for example. So they are building up new protocols for communication, and there is talking between them and financial institutions to complement their services with certain financial services, right? Yeah. So APIs is one methodology, technical methodology to connect data that is available in these Internet of Things platforms with the bank. Now it's not so that one individual thing will communicate information to the bank, right? So you have IoT platforms, from these big vendors, and they aggregate information, they mash it up, which is then, used by a service provider, such as a bank, but an insurance company or other things, right? So there is a level of analytics, aggregation happening first before actually the service provider comes in, right? Yeah. D'autres questions? Other questions? Ok, merci.